republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing and join the board in a moment of silence as we honor our first responders and our veterans. And this evening, please keep in your thoughts and your prayers all those innocent civilians, mothers, fathers, babies, that were slaughtered by the senseless attack on the state of Israel this past weekend. It's absolutely disgusting. We stand with the state of Israel, and we certainly condemn any attacks such as those on innocent people. So please keep those people and those here affected by those events in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. This evening we have two hearings on the docket. Before I do proceed to the hearings, I would like to mention that earlier today, before the hearings, we had a ceremony to welcome guests from Estereja, Portugal. We have the mayor of the Portuguese city of Estereja here, along with the delegation of volunteer firefighters who are on an exchange program with our own volunteer fire department, hence why you may see the Portuguese flag next to the American flag by the podium. So we're going to have two hearings this evening. Mr. Rivera, I'd ask you to call the first one, please.
Application of Michael E. Malia for a special permit pursuant to Chapter 550 of the Code of the Incorporated Village of Mineola entitled Zoning, Section 550-15.2, entitled Jericho Turnpike Overlay District, to construct a three-story, 10-unit residential building located upon the property known as 155 Jericho Turnpike, Mineola, New York, known and designated on the Nassau County Land and Tax Map as Section 9, Block 405, Lot 156.
Okay, thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, affidavit of mailings? Thank you. Mr. Gibbons?
Yes, can I have a resolution declaring this an unlisted action under CEQA?
Entertain a resolution.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by trustee Casado. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Clark. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, as we do with all our hearings, this is the way that the format for this evening's hearing will work. The applicant or representative of the applicant will make a presentation to the board, at the conclusion of which the board will then interact with the applicant or the applicant's representative, and then we will open it up to public comment. We do ask that you keep your comments and questions relevant to this particular application. If you have any questions, the applicant will note them and will answer them, and then if we need to go back for a second round, we certainly will do that. With that, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Members of the board, Mr. Pereira, Mr. Gibbons. My name is Marco Silva. I'm an attorney with Harris Beach, 333 Earl Oakington Boulevard, Suite 901 in Uniondale, New York. I'm here on behalf of the owner and applicant, 4190 Austin Boulevard, LLC, and have with me tonight Dr. Palavin, principal, as well as Michael Malia, which is the architect for this project. The property's address is 155 Jericho Turnpike, Section 9, Block 450, Lot 156. It is located on the south side of Jericho Turnpike, about 150 feet west of Willis Avenue. The lot is approximately 46 by 100. It's actually 4626 square feet, and is improved by a two-story building constructed in 1908. The subject property is located within the B1 Business Zoning District, as modified by the Jericho Turnpike Overlay District, which is pursuant to Article 4, Section 550-15.2 of the Mineola Zoning Code. As we all know, a comprehensive master plan was commissioned by the Mineola Community Planning Commission and produced in 2005. The master plan recognized the need for multifamily residential uses and specifically called for consideration to be given to such housing along select corridors. In Exhibit A, page 34, is the highlighted section where it talks about that. And in December of 2021, the Jericho Turnpike corridor was thus selected by the village by the enactment of Local Law 4-2022, which is now codified as Section 550-15.2, known as the Jericho Turnpike Overlay District. The property also happens to be within the village, the quote, Village Center Cluster, which is on pages 2 and 17 of that Exhibit A, which is where you have the Village Hall, Firehouse, everything else. And this application is made pursuant to that section, which authorizes the Board of Trustees to consider each application on a case-by-case basis in light of the overall vision for this overlay district and the comprehensive master plan, as well as the ongoing revitalization efforts undertaken by the village since then. In order to further these goals, the board is authorized to ease various technical, use, and dimensional requirements of the code, which would otherwise render these revitalization efforts impossible. In this case, the applicant is requesting relaxations for height, unit size, parking, and a de minimis front setback requirement. This property has been vacant for several years, as many of you know, and recently suffered fire damage which originated from another building. And it's been that way for a long time. And part of the reason it's been vacant for so long, it's been very difficult to find a tenant there. It's a rather large retail space with no parking, and the taxes were, I believe, about $40,000 total. So it's very difficult. So this application is to replace that existing fire damaged and long vacant building with a brand new 3-story mixed-use building with a retail frontage on the ground floor and 10 total apartments, ranging in square footage from 746 to 930. We'll get to that in a bit, but they're all within the range that we expect in this overlay zone. So the goal of this overlay zone is to transform the area into a vibrant and walkable area with a variety of complementary retail, commercial, and residential uses. And the proposal has been carefully tailored to fit within the parameters of the Jericho Turnpike Overlay District in accordance with subsection E of 550-15-2, which is entitled Purpose. This includes intentional variations from the certain underlying code requirements as specifically contemplated by this overlay district. For example, the proposed building facade will continue the existing street wall, whereas the underlying code requires a 5-foot setback. This current building has a 0.16, and the overlay district suggests 0. So it continues the existing. No change is requested here. The underlying B1 district allows for 2-story buildings of 25 feet, whereas the overlay allows for 3 stories and 40 feet. The proposed building is 3 stories and 45 foot 3 inches high at the top of the parapet wall, where the roof deck is 40 feet. Although this is shorter than the recently approved building to the west, which I believe is 4 stories. The B1 district has a minimum unit size of 1,000 square feet, and the overlay allows for 750 square feet. The units, as I mentioned before, are between 746 and 934 square feet. Parking is addressed by subsection C2 of the overlay district law and by 550-2E entitled Payment in lieu of Parking, Parking Trust Fund, with which the applicant will comply, in addition to providing community benefits and amenities in accordance with the code requirements and terms that are acceptable to the village. The building, as proposed, is in character with the neighborhood and is entirely consistent with the recommendations contained in the comprehensive master plan and in the Jericho Turnpike Overlay District, with no adverse impacts on the surrounding community. The building itself will be fully sprinklered and alarmed and fully ADA compliant, all apartments, and includes an elevator. With regard to the layout and design choices and all that, I'd like to introduce Michael Malia up if you have any questions regarding those.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Michael Malia from DiPrepazio Malia Architects, 499 Jericho Turnpike, right down the block. I'll walk you through the plans. So this will be the front elevation. It'll be brick, limestone.
Mr. Malley, if you could just speak into the
I'm sorry.
microphone, because this is
Sure.
being recorded. Yeah.
Brick, limestone, storefront, very similar to a lot of the other buildings that are along Jericho. The building will pretty much occupy the entire lot except for the rear yard, where we'll have a rear outside patio for the ground floor and balconies on the second and third floor. The cellar will have storage for the residential units and storage for the retail. The first floor will have an entry lobby, elevator, staircase. The retail will occupy the east end of the building. There'll be 2 apartments at the rear of the building, each with a courtyard. 1 bedroom, 1 bath. The second floor will have 4 units with a stairwell and elevator. All of them 1-bedroom units, 1-bath units. The rear units will have a balcony. And the third floor is exactly the same as the second floor. That's it. Any question? Oh, yeah, the balconies are 6 feet out, and there's 4 feet to the property line.
I do have a question, either for you or for Mr. Silva.
Sure.
Garbage.
Oh, sorry, got to mention that.
Oh,
On the first floor, in the lobby, we have a garbage refuse room with a, which will support a 1 cubic foot rollable dumpster that the tenants can take out and put at street level. So that's 1 cubic yard, 1,200 pounds. It should be enough for two pickups a week.
okay, so
Private card?
Private card.
Yes,
Private card.
yes.
Okay. Good, you're saying all the right things.
That's what I was getting at.
You're saying all the right things. So again, just to remind everyone, this is the building next door to the old Piccolo Busolo restaurant that suffered a fire about 3 years ago. And this building also had severe fire, smoke, and water damage. And certainly, frankly, I don't think anybody would disagree that it's been an eyesore for a number of years, for about 3 years now. And even before that, it was difficult to find a tenant for that space. I know that. We live here. It was difficult. The last tenant, I believe, who had not been there very long was a dollar store. And obviously, they closed as a result of the fire. And to try to attempt to find another tenant to fill that entire space would be difficult. And although it was 2 stories, the second story, as I understand, was virtually unusable in terms of any real space for retail or for residential as the building was built, as you heard, in 1908. This is, for me, this is the type of application that I was thinking of, and I think the board was thinking of when we looked at this overlay district on Jericho Turnpike, right? To turn dilapidated, empty storefronts into vibrant, either residential or mixed-use buildings. And yes, of course, there's no parking. We're talking about 10 units with no parking. There was no parking there with the prior use, and if you built as of right, there would still be no parking. And if you went solely retail, you would have dozens or maybe more trips generated a day, whereas here, you may have people who do leave for work in the morning, come home in the afternoon, or who may walk to the train station, although we do realize that it's not right at the station. This actually technically still qualifies as transit-oriented development because it's within a half mile of a train station. And I actually looked at the map. There are 6 village lots within 1 block of this property, providing well over 200 spaces just to the west between the firehouse and Piccolo Busolo, and then on the other side of the firehouse, behind Noches de Colombia, behind Willis Hobbies, and of course even here at Village Hall, if need be during the day. So there are lots in the immediate vicinity that could certainly handle any parking from the residents. And as you mentioned, Mr. Silva, when we did this overlay district, we put in there specifically for this purpose, where on Jericho, just about everyone on Jericho Turnpike that is a commercial use does not have any dedicated parking. Never did, and probably never will. This is exactly why we put this parking trust fund, which obviously the applicant has agreed to contribute to. So I don't have any questions. I'll leave it to my trustees, fellow trustees, to add anything, and then I'll like to hear from the public. Anything else, Mr. Silva, before we
Just
open to questions?
little details. It's all the units are single bedroom units. on purpose. Some are larger, some are bigger. The main floor is 1,200 square foot at the front of retail space with 2 units behind it. It
So
could-
you're not expecting to have families, that we're not gonna have,
No,
you
that's
know,
the
high
whole purpose of
occupancy?
single-bedroom units, is to, keep down the number of cars that might be associated with each one of these apartments.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to us. I think this is exactly what, at least I had in mind when we did approve the overlay district. It's a wonderful fit to it. I really don't have a lot of questions. The one question or concern, I don't think you're even there yet, but when you get there, just making the front look welcoming. I know there's retail in there. I don't know what kind of signage, because we don't know who the retail customer is yet, or resident is yet. But make the signage look inviting, make it look warm and friendly for our downtown, because right now it just looks very basic. So if you could do some kind of aesthetics, would be beautiful. Planters, something simple, could just add a little life to it. But I think it's a good fit. I think that, to the mayor's point, the parking is not gonna be an issue, and there's a lot of lots right there, and it would be an issue more so if it was just a standard retail location. So I welcome you. Hopefully, it's successful for you. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that was considered, and with respect to the facade, the materials, that's flexible. That's just one proposal, because it matches other nearby buildings, the new Village Hall, or the Village Hall, I'm sorry, the
Right,
firehouse. Yeah.
And-
So you may either want it to be similar, or you may want it to contrast. All that at this stage is all flexible.
So the building next door, which had the fire, has been approved for a new proposal, new project there has been approved. So I would recommend maybe looking at what they're doing and just have them complement each other. Don't make it look the same, and make it look just like one massive building, but just have them complement each
Right.
other and continue it down the line. So thank you.
Trustee Casado?
Thank you, Mayor. Gentlemen, good evening. So obviously, the west wall is going to face the adjoining building, no windows. The east wall looks like it's going to be all brick, no windows as well?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And I actually like the back of the building. The back of the building looks better than the front of the building with the balcony,
At the balconies.
but I know you can't put the balcony on Jericho Turnpike, I don't think.
You can do anything, I don't know if you.
I don't
Yeah,
think you ever want
but
that.
as the deputy may state, I'm kind of concerned if this building's gonna match the building right next door. I don't know if you want it to match or not, just a concern.
I mean, the balcony looks good in paper, but when you have an occupant there, sometimes they put their barbecue, they throw their chairs out there, and then it becomes an eyesore.
okay.
So we try to avoid that, so.
Okay, so is this building gonna be as large as the next door building? Have you seen the plans of the building?
This is a story shorter than the building
I'm
next.
sorry?
1 story shorter.
No, I know, as far as the length.
Oh, the length,
It doesn't matter, just as a question.
I don't know.
No,
Okay.
It's shorter because the other property goes from Washington to Jericho
Right.
completely, and this one does not
Okay.
go the length of that. And it's definitely narrower.
Right,
This
this is
one's 46 wide, the other one is definitely wider than 46.
Right, and we have 10 foot off the rear yacht, the
Yeah,
rear,
right,
right, so we're at
right.
90 feet or so
Right.
length.
So now here's my crucial question. As the board knows, I have a major issue with water and sewage. So over the past 2 years now, we approved 5 buildings that have yet to be occupied. So how do I know if the numbers, the water and sewage numbers that you presented are the right numbers?
Right, so
How do I know that?
under Exhibit B, you have from
I
VHB.
have your numbers, I have your numbers.
Right.
How do I know if they're, right now, we have 5 unoccupied buildings.
Right, and so,
And 5 years from now, they're all gonna be occupied maybe, so how do I know if you have the right numbers?
well, right now, the Bay Park sewage treatment plant is processing about 50 million gallons per day. They have capacity to service about 70 million, so they have 20 million gallons capacity. And what we're going to be producing here is 2,069 gallons per day of sewage. With regard to water, that's also in Exhibit B, we're looking at up to about 2,100 gallons per day of use. And in both cases, sewer and water availability requests were submitted to Mineola and to the town, or to the county, rather.
I just have an issue. We have so many buildings out there that are being approved, yet to be built, and I just have a concern. What's really gonna happen 4 or 5 years from now? When I turn on my faucet, it's gonna be water or drip, drip, drip.
Understood.
I think, and
And I know what all
those
you're
points are
talking,
valid, but any approval that we have here obviously is contingent upon the availability of water and sewer. We can approve all the projects we want. If the county cannot handle, or if our water, it's put into the decision and it automatically becomes null and void. So it will never get to drip, drip, drip. But
But Mayor, how
as
do
you
we
see
know that?
here, as you see, so
I got a concern, I'm sorry.
so
I
the
just-
source, as I'm reading here,
Yeah.
based upon Nassau County Department of Public Works minimum design sewage flow rates. Nassau County Department of Public Works minimum design sewage flow rates at 200 GPD per unit for 1 bedroom and .03 GPD per square foot for dry stores.
Yes.
I assume this comes from engineers
Yes.
who, and this is, a science, that this is based on science, and until proven otherwise, I have to accept this science that tells us that there is currently enough availability at Bay Park Sewage Treatment Plant to treat this, plus 19,900,000 and some odd other gallons of sewage a day. It's literally a drop in the bucket. I'm not saying that at some point, and it's not just us, it's everybody else. So every time somebody builds something in a neighboring community or anywhere in Nassau County, that's going to impact that number, and then the county will say, okay, we're maxed out, you can't approve anything, or even things that you've approved, sorry, you approved them, but you're going to have to tell them the bad news.
But Mayor,
But I understand your concern.
I agree with your, yeah, but you know what? Again, we have 5 residential communities. Well, we have the Bridge Project, which is like 120 apartments. We have the Harrison, Maine, 12, 14 apartments, not occupied. We got the Bridge Project, the Harrison Avenue, 14 and 15. So you add up all those numbers, eventually it's gonna come back to maybe bite us. That's what I'm trying to.
And as I said, I believe it was in September, we are commissioning a hydraulic study
Yeah.
by our engineers,
Yeah, so-
DMV,
okay.
with those numbers in
Okay.
a real-world scenario of what is our availability, what is our capabilities with those. So we are in the process of commissioning that study before any of these things
Fine,
are
that's great.
able to
Okay. You know
get
what?
off the ground.
Yeah, you know what?
And I do think it's also bears pointing out that this is up here on Jericho Turnpike. Much of what we have been discussing or approving, or applications before us, have been significantly south of here, so down by the train
I
station.
agree, but you know what?
different-
This is
different
another
demands.
number. There's another number that needs to be added to the
Yeah, it's
the
10,
counts.
it's 10.
10, but the
10.
10 is maybe 20 people, 30 people, but it needs to be added to the total amount of the other people in the village.
Yes, but.
That's
but
my
let's-
concern.
But let's also remember that it wasn't this or an empty lot. It was this, or it is this, or as of right, which is they could put a commercial use in there, right? They could put in I'm sure that at some point probably was some kind of restaurant or a diner or, a soda fountain place. I remember there was one on this side. I don't know if it was exactly.
Yeah,
not
it was
really
officials, I think.
Officials, right?
Or
So-
Peppers, maybe
right?
back in the
So
60s.
do those places
Yes.
use more water when people are coming in? They're washing dishes and going to the bathroom and
Yeah.
flushing toilets?
Okay.
Could it be a medical use? Could it be
Yeah,
any
right.
other number of uses that could be as of right in terms of the zoning? So it's not 10 units or nothing, it's 10 units or something else.
No,
right?
I definitely agree with that, because you know what? If we don't approve this, it could be a hole in the ground with a chain link fence around it. right?
Nobody
So-
wants to see, I think
No,
we've
No,
looked at that
I
long
agree.
enough.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And to put the numbers into perspective, we're
just-
talking about 2,000 gallons per day here with a capacity of 20 million. So that it's barely noticeable.
Yeah, okay, all right. That's
yeah,
my
anything
concern.
else, Mr. Saad?
I've said enough, I think.
No, absolutely, no.
Again, I'm just expressing my concern.
Thank you, and we appreciate that.
overall
And
concern.
And it's a valid concern, absolutely. Trustee Clark?
Good evening. I like the project. I think it's a good fit for that spot. I think it works. I just agree with my colleagues that to any way to dress up the building, make it a little nicer, a little softer would be a good thing to do. No questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Trustee Salaski?
I had two questions. One was already answered about the private carding for the trash, so I thank you for that. My only question was more a safety issue for the fire department. That storage area in the basement where you had storage for the apartments, not necessarily the stores,
Correct, yes.
is that area going to be subdivided up? Based on the plans, as I could read them,
Right.
it just looked like one empty room.
Well, there is one empty room, and then there were cages for bicycle storage or lock storage. So there are three different locked storage areas and then one large storage area. But the building will be sprinkled. It's a fireproof building, you know, it's a non-combustible building, so anything, if there were a fire to happen down there, it would be extinguished easily and it wouldn't go up to other floors.
Okay, because what I was worried about, stuff blocking the door as the firefighters were in the
Oh.
basement, things like that.
Right.
That there were sections for
Yes.
the apartments
Yes.
themselves. So if I rented one, I would have a designated area to store my stuff, whatever I needed.
Right.
And
Typi-
then other people would not be just
Right.
coming into my area.
Typically, we would provide chain link cages, basically.
Okay, great.
So that's
But
how we,
open, but
yeah,
open.
but open, correct, yeah.
Okay, that was
Alright.
my only question. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, sure.
I just have one question that
Sure.
you just raised. You said the bicycles may be stored down there.
Yeah.
Will you have rules, or maybe you should consider rules, about e-scooters and e-bikes? Because this is a residential building.
Right.
With, most likely, somebody will not have a car and will use things like that. And I know it is a fire issue
That is an
overall.
excellent
So
point.
something to consider, not to
Sure.
put those in the basement.
Right,
Maybe they
yes.
belong on a balcony, or I don't know the right
Right.
place to put them, but
Excellent point.
just
I agree
consideration.
100% with that, yeah,
thank you.
yes.
Mr. Malley, can you explain to us, so you can't put windows on the east side of the building, you can't put windows on the west side of the building?
Yes.
How are you bringing in natural light to
So-
these buildings? And can you speak to, obviously, you have to meet state fire code?
Yes.
And how are you doing that when you're kind
So-
of building
Yeah,
this
so
way?
all of the apartments have windows that face the front and the rear with very large, oh, that's first floor. So all of the living room, the bedroom.
Just, if you
sure.
can bring that over.
No problem, okay. So-
Not over to me,
Yes,
over to
it's
the
the
microphone. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
the living rooms and the bedrooms all have the big windows facing the street, and the same thing on the rear. They meet the light and ventilation as required by New York State Code, and basically, the kitchens are ventilated through the space. So you have the 30 feet is the ventilation for the kitchen, and it complies with that. So basically, it complies with light and ventilation as far as New York State Code is concerned.
So the only room that will not have a window will be the bathroom?
That's correct.
So the kitchen, because it's open to the living area, essentially, it uses the same
Yes.
light?
Yes. Okay?
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, gentlemen, please have a seat.
Great, thank you.
Anyone in the third row, fourth row, fifth row, sixth row? Anyone in the seventh row? Nope, anyone at all? Okay. Any other questions from the board? Nope. Mr. Gibbons, anything, any reason why we could not vote on this evening?
No, Mayor, if you are going to vote it, I would like to offer a resolution preceding your vote.
Okay, I would like to vote this evening. Does anyone have any problems with that? No? So, Mr. Gibbons?
Thank you, Mayor. Resolved that the Board of Trustees, as lead agency for the development of a three-story residential building with 10 residential units upon the property located at 155 Jericho Turnpike, Mineola, and after due deliberation, review, and analysis of the proposed action and the criteria set forth in 6 NYCRR, Section 617.7, Sub C and Sub E, hereby determines that the proposed action will not result in significant adverse impacts to the environment and therefore is issuing this negative declaration.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the negative declaration.
Motion.
Motion by Deputy Mayor Sartori. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Trustee Salaski. Mr. Rivera, please poll the board.
Trustee Clark,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sartori,
Yes.
Trustee Casada.
I'm reluctantly gonna vote yes because I
No,
have an
This
issue.
is just for the secret.
Okay, yes,
Just
okay.
for the secret.
Yeah.
Yes.
Trustee Salaski,
Yes.
Mayor Pereira.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, I will now entertain a motion to approve the application.
Motion.
Motion by Deputy Mayor Sartori. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Clark. Mr. Rivera, please poll the board.
Trustee Clark,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Sartori,
Yes.
Trustee Casada.
Again, I'm gonna reluctantly vote yes because I have an issue with the water issue. Overall, basically, for our community, so I will reluctantly vote yes.
Trustee Salaski,
Yes.
Mayor Pereira.
Yes. Congratulations, good luck. Mr. Silva, Mr. Malia, please stay in touch with our building department to ensure that everything is being followed. And most importantly, please move forthwith with the demolition of the building. That would be greatly appreciated by all of us. So if you can move on that with the blessing of our building department, our water department, that would be very much appreciated by all of us. Okay? Congratulations, thank you. We look forward to keeping you in the village. Thank you. Have a good
Thank you,
night.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Do you need a break or we're good? We're good? Yeah, you're fine? All right, this is easy, right?
Piece of cake.
Okay,
Very bad harder.
Piece of cake.
let's just give them a minute to clear. Okay, Mr. Rivera, please call the second application.
Application of Combined Resources Consulting and Design, Inc. for a special permit pursuant to Chapter 550 of the Code of the Incorporated Village of Mineola entitled Zoning, Section 550-15.3, entitled Historic Overlay District, to construct a three-story, 30-unit residential addition to an existing commercial building with parking on grade upon the property known as 155 First Street, Mineola, New York, known and designated on the Nassau County Land and Tax Map as Section 9, Block 420, Lot 26.
Okay, affidavit of mailings, Mr. O'Keefe? Yes, we have. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gibbons?
Yes, I'd ask for a resolution declaring this an unlisted action under CEQA.
Entertain a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Trustee Clark, seconded by Trustee Salaski. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Again, I'm not going to go over the process I just did, but the applicant, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, Mr. Gibbons. My name is Jack Martins. I appear on behalf of 155 First Street LLC, the developer of this project. Here with me tonight, we have Michael Ambrosino and Frank Assisi, who are the owners of the property. In addition, we have the project architect responsible for the building design, Mr. Sal Ferrara. We'll be talking about a different place in this village and a different overlay. The previous application was the Jericho Turnpike Overlay District. The one we will be talking about for this application is the historic, village's historic overlay district, which itself is part of the village's downtown overlay district. So we have a number of different overlays, each one slightly different, but the historic overlay district, I believe, is significant simply because we're dealing with what has and was historically the core of the village's downtown. the Main Street corridor and the blocks immediately around that. This particular property is located at 155 First Street. For those of us who like landmarks, like it's across the street from the post office. So if you're standing on the steps of the post office and you're looking directly south, on the southeast corner of First and Main is this property. You first would see a parking lot, and then alongside that parking lot, there's a commercial building. For purposes of the record, the tax map designations for the property is Section 9, Block 420, lots 26, 27, 28, 29, 122, 124, and 125. It's approximately just over half an acre. The existing building that's there was built about 60 years ago, sometime, I believe, 1964 or 1965. It is located in the village's B2 district, which is special business and special residential, as modified, as I said, by the village's historic downtown overlay district. Our application tonight is made pursuant to the Mineola Village Code, Section 550-15.3, which authorizes the Board of Trustees to consider each application on a case-by-case basis. It's in light of the vision for the downtown, the village's comprehensive master plan, and the downtown revitalization efforts since undertaken by our village. In order to accomplish this, there's a great deal of flexibility built into the code. The board is authorized to ease various technical, use, and dimensional requirements of the code, which would otherwise make any such revitalization efforts very difficult, if not impossible. And the authority for that comes from state code and state law. It's found in Village Law, Section 7-703, that authorizes communities across New York State to do just that. Although we know Mineola is unique and has done a great job when it comes to downtown revitalization and using overlay districts, the authority for those overlay districts is actually found in the village law itself. Again, highlighting the importance of these overlays when it comes to downtown revitalization. Pursuant to Zoning Code 550-15.3, applicants are to provide either public amenities or facilities or payments in lieu, again, on a case-by-case basis. In light of the size and scope of the development and degree of relief requested, some of the larger buildings that were referenced earlier had many amenities. One included a fire truck. Others included ball field and park improvements. Some included just contributions to the village's general fund or to a recreational fund. And so depending on the size and scope of the project, there's an appropriate, local incentive fee that is assessed for the project. In this case, the relief requested is relaxation for various setbacks, including lot coverage, unit sizes, height, and parking-related requirements as noticed in the notice of denial. This application seeks to add 3-story residential building over parking, so elevated above parking, to a portion of an existing commercial building. So there's a building that's there now. It's about 13,000 square feet. The idea is to pare it down. About 20,000 square feet. And the idea is to pare it down to a little under 11,000 square feet or a little over 10,000 square feet, as depending on your perspective, and to add a building to it, which would have 30 apartment buildings, 30 apartment units, 28 one-bedroom and 2 studios. 12 on the first floor, 12 on the second floor, and the upper floor would have 6. All of that is consistent with, as I mentioned earlier, the village's master plan, which was commissioned back in 2005. In 2015, the village also commissioned a study to evaluate multifamily residential development and capacity in the incorporated village of Mineola, essentially to see how the village was doing. had we reached capacity? Was there still a need to build more multifamily housing? And according to this study prepared in 2015, there were a couple of key findings. We can refer back to the study itself. We don't need to necessarily read it. But in essence, I think the report found that the village was doing an effective job with the overlay, that there's still a need for diversity in housing options in the village, and that the overlay district is an effective tool that allows the village the necessary flexibility in order to actually implement the goals of the master plan. And so it noted in the 2015 report, and it's something that I've heard, I guess several times over the last couple of years at least, that there were 3,000 fewer people living in Mineola in 2010 than there were in 1970. And that although this growth in the number of multifamily units in our downtown is being governed obviously by the board, and there are numbers out there, we're actually dealing with the reality of having fewer people living in the village, fewer impacts in the village than there were just 40 years ago. So the population went down. I understand from more recent census, the population has inched up a little bit as well. But to put things historically into context, it's important to understand we're probably, if not back, perhaps nearly back to where we were 40 years ago in population, even with the projects that have been approved in the villages downtown over the last 10 years. So we are proposing to build, as I said, 3 stories. The underlying B2 zone allows for 2 different criteria for height. In a business, if you're building a commercial building, it's 2 stories or 25 feet. If you're building a residential project, it's 3 stories or 35 feet. The project that's being proposed is just over 40 feet, and certainly in keeping not only with the code, the overlay, but also the existing conditions in the area. So their proposal is for 30 apartments. There'll be 54 parking spaces. And again, given the historic nature, more than the required spots that would ordinarily be required for 30 apartments. Now, the existing commercial building will have about 19,000 or 20,000 square feet, as I was corrected. But if you consider that, if you have a 20,000 square foot building, the code at the time required 1 parking spot per 250 square feet, which is 80 parking spots. There are 51 spots there now, so the building as it currently exists and sits has less parking than it would otherwise be required to have pursuant to the code. By demolishing a portion of the building and adding on these apartments, we're actually going to require less parking than what was required for the building that's there. The overlay zone requires 1 spot per 400 square feet when it comes to commercial use, and requires 1.25 or 1.5 spots per apartment when it comes to residential use. And so when you aggregate that, the number of spots that are being proposed here are consistent with the overlay. And I believe this is rather unique because we've always talked about in the village, certainly as part of the comprehensive master plan and even some of the further studies that were done since then, the idea that there should be a form of shared parking when it comes to commercial use and residential use, that parking can be used in tandem and you have the opportunity for people to leave for work in the morning before people arrive for the business use, and then at the end of the day, who will leave before those who are coming back home arrive at home. So that parking lot doesn't necessarily sit empty. And we see that oftentimes with many of our commercial uses, particularly banks, where you have a large parking lot associated with the bank, but on weekends and after hours, you hardly see any cars there. And so the idea of sharing parking between the 2 uses, I think, is consistent. And here, where we're going to have commercial and residential use side by side, it makes a lot of sense. So before we discuss the standards that are used in the village code in evaluating a special permit, I just wanted to take the opportunity to introduce the project's architect, the person who designed this project. He can talk about the aesthetics of the building, certainly some of the elevations that are behind me here, and certainly get into some of the particulars with regard to the building. Suffice it to say, before Mr. Ferrara comes up, the building is ADA compliant, will be ADA compliant, will be fully sprinklered. There will be garbage pickup. There'll be an area on site for garbage storage. It'll be accessed via doors and a curb cut that currently exists on Main Street, which will allow access to it so that they can actually pick up and remove the garbage from the building, and it will be obviously done by private carter. After Mr. Ferrara speaks, I will come back and talk about water and sewer. Mr. Ferrara.
Good evening. My name is Sal Ferrara. I am located at 155 First Street, the subject property. So I'll be living this as we go through it. So we've taken every precaution to try and make this as nice as possible. In search, because this is a downtown historic district, we searched the other buildings that are in the area, and there are a number of different styles that are there, some new, some old. Obviously, you know, the most chaotic of it all is a 6-story parking garage, which is related to 120 Mineola Boulevard. There's not much way you could hide it or mask it. It is the most prominent piece of architecture in the area. So looking away from that, we had several options in order to find what we felt was an appropriate archetype in order to bring to this building. In going up and down the street, and I did bring packages if you would like to see of pictures going up and down the streets, there are several buildings that actually have a low gable end on it. Most notably would be the Fox's building, which are down a little bit further on Main Street, but there were also several on 2nd, and there's one on Main Street, which is just down the block from our building. As Mayor knows, on the opposite side of the street where there was the fire on several buildings, 2 of those buildings also had a similar low gable approach to it. The building that is all the way on the corner of Mineola Boulevard and 2nd Street, that one also has a very low gable. So we felt that as a historic district, it should attach itself to some of the architecture that's in the area. And that was the most prominent thing that we could say, that in some consistency lived in the area. The other thing that was consistent was that most of these buildings were red brick buildings. Across the street from us on the north side of First Street, there is a very contemporary building. It's a 2-story building, parking on the first level. Second level is a medical suite. That one is in a jumbo brick, and it's in a light tan color, again, offbeat to the rest of the neighborhood. Looking further to the east on First Street, you're actually looking at the side of 2 masonry walls that are done with cinder block that are painted white with very few windows. Those buildings face basically to Willis Avenue, and their side walls are actually along First Street. So on First Street itself, we only have the 2 red brick buildings, which are the Presbyterian Church, which is to the north and west of us, and the post office, which is a lovely building from the corner view of it. The rest of it is really just punched windows and a brick wall. So the brick, we feel, is magnanimous in where we have to be with the look of the building. Currently, the site has a fencing around it. It is a black estate fence, and we plan on reusing that. However, we felt that it was important to tie some of the elements of the building into the fencing. So along the streetscape, we will be adding brick piers, so that again, the brick from the building will be synonymous with the brick for the piers, and again, it will start to tie the overall site together. The building, because the first level is over the parking, the 2 full levels that we are looking at are set back about 20 feet from both First Street and Main Street, and it's also a distance of about 7 feet or 8 feet, I forget off the top of my head, from the building that is south of us, which is again just a large blank wall that's painted white. In order to reduce the bulk of the building so it fit more nicely into the neighborhood. The upper floor, which only has 6 units instead of 12, is actually pushed back 5 feet off of the face of the First Street side of it, giving us an opportunity for balconies and also giving us an area where we could put a little bit more detail in terms of how the building actually looks on the street. And because the building is basically favoring the south side of the street, it would also allow more sunlight to hit to the street, which we felt again was a bonus for how the building actually worked in the neighborhood. The existing building, which is a 2-story office building, what we're looking to do is remove, and it's a little complex, but we're removing the back portion of the building, which will be the southwest corner of the building. And in that corner, we are putting in a set of fire stairs and an elevator and a common lobby that will be both used for the residential building and for the second floor office space. It's a little complex, but it worked out very nicely. Basically, it would be controlled by either a card key or by a fob of some sort, so that if you were going to the apartment building, you could not get into the office side or vice versa. And we felt that that was an appropriate way to do that, and it also solved the fact that the current building does not have handicap accessibility. The parking lot, which fits underneath the building, and as Mr. Martins had said, we have a trash area which would be on the back side of the building here, which is against the blank wall to the building to our south. And again, that would be a fenced-in area so you wouldn't see the rubbish, and we would have that as an opportunity to have the rubbish removed off hours by private carting on early mornings and so on. The building itself, we've added details and cornices, again, to kind of tie it into the details and cornices of the existing buildings in the neighborhood. We'll be using a clear glass that will be, synonymous with the way all of the other apartment buildings are in the area, which gives you a little depth, and you can see somewhat into the buildings, curtains and things, makes it feel a little bit more lively, and it also gives some increased interest into the plane of the building, because you begin to see through it in some regard. The second floor of the office building is basically the same as it is currently. The building right now is painted a gold color. We're looking to paint it in off-white, more of a china white, if I could call it that, with gray accents. And we think that'll soften up the building a bit, and we think that'll make it look much more contemporary in terms of the way it is, and fit a little bit nicer with the way the building lays out. We're also going to put a layer of brick across the top band of the building above the first floor, and again, in this way, bring some of the brick into the other building and make it feel more like it's a consistent part of the existing landscape, and also to the new building that we're looking to build. We're not looking to make them look exactly the same, because that obviously is not going to be something that's easy to occur. But for the sake of argument, we felt that the finishes and the looks of the finishes should be in some regard connected, so that they do feel like they are part of the same project. There is a space that is between the two buildings, which is in that space, and there in the back of that space, as you go back about 15 feet, then it is filled in, and that is actually the connecting corridor that goes back to that new entranceway where the stair and elevators are located. So we've conjoined the two buildings through a connecting link that attaches itself to a common lobby that services the two buildings. There is no basement in the existing building. The existing building is slab on grade, other than a utility space, which is located in the front of the building, which is a small room where the electrical is. Which is a small basement area for utilities where the electrical service comes in, the sanitary goes out, and the water and sprinkler service come in. So we're maintaining that one space. In the back of the building, on the southeast corner of the building, we will be putting in personal storage. All right, we'll go one more time. So in the back of the building, on the southeast corner, we will be putting in, again, a series of fenced-in areas for personal storage for the units that are in the building. It's not for outside use, it's for people in the building.
It spins around.
Yeah, goes around, comes around. So at the end of the day, we've accommodated not only the use of the apartments, which are largely one-bedroom apartments, but we've also accommodated for the storage of the people that would be living in those apartments, and for us also for the office space to have appropriate storage on hand.
Smart.
So again, the idea was to capture a different architectural element in the historic district by taking different elements. And frankly, if you look at some of the buildings in the area, whether it's the Harrison House that's of a size, or the house on the corner of Harrison and Main Street, the Kingdom Homes house that has very similar architecture to this, and obviously similar height and density, it just flows from that as well. When it comes to water and sewer analysis, and we did prepare an expanded environmental assessment with regard to water and sewer. Projection is that there are going to be about 7,000 gallons per day produced from this building. We've already heard that Nassau County has a use of about 50 million gallons per day. They have capacity for 70 million. So on the sewer side, there's capacity there, assuming that the pipes are all of a size that they can accommodate it. But I do want to emphasize that 7,000 gallons per day is relatively de minimis. And I just pointed out in the context of just some of the things that we don't normally consider when it comes to water use. A restaurant will use far more water than these apartments. I was here a couple of months ago where the board considered, for example, Lucharitos, 4,000 square feet at Morgan Park, which is fantastic. I think it's a great application and a great use. But the water consumption for a restaurant of that size is going to be more than this entire project. And I think, yes, the village should consider it. But in the context of the village's use, I would just suggest that there are a couple of things. One, when it comes to water use, the village-owned water department has a good eye on how capacity is doing. The New York State Department of Health monitors it as well. And so, when you're talking about infrastructure, take a look, see what this development is going to look at. But look out, not only today, but look out 5 years and 10 years, because I would dare say the village is going to change over the next 5 or 10 years. There are buildings that are currently occupied, perhaps for medical use, that may not be occupied for medical use in 5 or 10 years. And so there are uses that are going to be coming offline, and there are uses that are going to be coming online. And that's just the nature of municipalities. So trying to predict where we're going to be in the future and where that's going to be, and keeping an eye on that usage. Mr. Casado, I'll tip my cap to you. Absolutely, it's important. We have to keep an eye on that. I would just suggest to Mayor, to you, and to the board that a project that has a capacity of 7,000 gallons per day, in the context of the capacity that we have here in the village, the capacity that the county has, is not where the line should be drawn with regard to this project. There are uses that don't involve 30 apartments, that may involve a use that's far more water intensive, that will use far more water, perhaps in a much smaller space. And so, again, I would urge you, just because this project happens to be one for 30 apartment units, the reality is it's 7,000 gallons per day in sewage that is being produced. The capacity of the county, as has been mentioned, they have a capacity of 20 million gallons per day. And so to contextualize it, this is respectfully, and I understand the logistics of it, probably not the project that will be deciding on the future capacity of the village and its water and sewer capacity. That being said, there are 9 factors that the village should consider in whether or not to grant a special use permit. You know what they are. I don't have to go through them. We've covered them as part of this dialogue, so to check them off, I think would probably not be necessary. But I would urge the board to consider them. This project is in keeping with the downtown. It is of a size and has dimensions that are consistent with the downtown overlay district and with the master plan that was envisioned by the village in terms of encouraging mixed uses in certain areas so that you do have the complementary use of resources as well. This project does check those boxes and therefore is a candidate for approval under the village's overlay district, and certainly this board has the discretion to do that. I just wanted to end with a discussion about the historic overlay district. Because as far as I'm aware, this may be the first project that is being proposed under the historic overlay district. Second, we missed it by 1. This is the kind of project you want to look at. The larger, more denser projects tend to be closer to the train station and down by the tracks. Some people would say on the south side of the tracks. But when you're looking at the area that was marked out for the master plan and the overlay zone as it stretched north to Harrison, there was a thought to having an area that was an intermediate layer that wasn't as dense as the stuff that was south, but certainly wanted to have more of a residential feel. And if you look at the project, the gables, the colors, the textures, and the thought that went into putting that into this area, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think consistent with the idea of the master plan and consistent with everything in its proper place with its proper architecture and proper dimensions, this project makes sense, and I would urge the board to consider voting yes on this project. I thank you for your time, and certainly we're available to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Martins. I do appreciate that. This is actually a question that I should have asked to the previous applicant, but we'll be sure to catch up with them. Now, you're going to have garbage over in the southeast corner, but will there be any building maintenance? Will there be a super on site? Will there be a management company? Who will be clearing the sidewalks? Who will be clearing the parking lot? Because as I understand it, the cars will be partially uncovered, correct? So
yes.
The cars will be partially exposed, and therefore the parking lot will not be fully exposed, which I like, because now you're taking the massing off of the sidewalk and you are allowing light to come in, but that also then opens that area to obviously to the elements. So what are the plans for the management of the property?
I'm glad you asked that, Mayor. This building is may actually be unique. This building will be owner occupied. The owner does occupy and will continue to occupy the commercial space as well. So they will be managing the property, the maintenance of the property. I don't know that there are any issues that would require a full-time super, but things like maintenance, snow removal, it certainly will be handled because the one person who will know firsthand when that's happening is the person who has to arrive at work and make sure that the snow is cleared on the sidewalks and around, because one of the benefits of being an owner, or one of the detriments of being an owner, and they know that he will be on site, is that if there is something that is wrong, I assure you that when they take that elevator up and they swipe to go into the apartment building, they'll probably swipe to go into the commercial building to have a conversation as well.
Okay. The other question is, if you could explain to me the parking, how it's going to work. So we have 30 units, and as we traditionally have done in the overlay district, is we've permitted 1.5 per unit, so that would be 45. You have 54, well within that. However, that only leaves 9 spots for the existing use of the building.
Sure.
And I do understand your argument about in a perfect world, you know, people come and go, and, you know, they may park overnight, but then they're going to work. But because this is a TOD development, people may leave their cars, so will people be assigned a spot? Will it be first come, first served? Will it be gated to get in? Will other people in the downtown just say, hey, I'm gonna pull into that lot right now, and so just explain to me how the parking is going to work. Not that I am so concerned about the parking downtown, because we do have that parking garage right across the street. We do have parking behind Fox's, and we do have parking at the Harrison Avenue garage. Certainly, there are, and we do have parking at the Little League ball fields
Sure.
that could be used. But I would think that the priority should be the residents,
Right.
and that the people that work 9 to 5, perhaps they could find parking off-site, because I don't see how, if I have spot number 38, and, you know, Mr. Ambrosino happens to be working late that day, and he's in spot 38, now I take spot 37, which is, you know, Ms. Sartori's spot, so just
No, let me-
walk us through that. And
let me
and
do that.
obviously, the internal, you know, running of the building is really none of our business, but as long as it doesn't impact our residents, our streets, our parking, and our quality of life.
Mayor, I appreciate the question. There are 28 one-bedroom and 2 studios. Each of the apartments will get 1 parking spot, leaving 24 spots that will have and be that variable. This building is going to be approximately 10,000 square feet according to the village's code. The overlay district, you require 1 spot per 400 square feet. So it does meet that. It's that half a spot that serves as the variable in the carryover. So you can assign 1 spot for every apartment, so they have, to your point, that spot, which is, I think, consistent with what,
Guaranteed.
which is consistent with what the village has done with many of the projects that it has considered and approved, making sure that there's a spot associated with the apartment, while at the same time, there's enough flexibility with regard to the remaining spots to cover the needs of the commercial space, as well as, you know, if people are coming to visit those apartments as well. There is a parking lot just up the block by the ball fields. It is literally a block away. But the idea is exactly that, and the expectation is that the spot will be, and the lot will be gated, so that people do get home and have a spot waiting for them, and somebody doesn't decide that they're gonna leave their car there to visit, you know, one of the other spots. There are enough municipal lots, whether it's the MAA fields, whether it's the lot off 2nd Street behind Fox's, whether even the multi-story municipal lot behind what we all remember to be Eleanor Rigby's. There's enough parking there for people if they need access. But to your point, important that every apartment have a spot, and certainly there's enough spots to cover the commercial building for that flexibility. And I did want to highlight, and I kind of walked through it a little quickly, and thanks to Mr. Ambrosino, I got the number right. But this building is already deficient when it comes to parking. It's remarkable that by adding 30 apartments, you actually ended up with less of a parking need by the village's code and by the count. But that's the reality of where we are. So by improving the building with what we're talking about here, we actually end up with more spots,
So if I just want to understand. you
according
have
to the
that-
village's code.
So
Sure.
you have 30 units, or 28 plus 2, so essentially 30 spots will be guaranteed. If I have 1 car, I'm guaranteed a spot, the same spot.
If you have an
every day.
apartment, you're getting a spot.
Getting a spot, an assigned spot, and then those other 24, from 30 to 54, those are flex. And so if I do have a second car, there is no guarantee that I'll have a spot, but I likely will after hours. Is that what you're saying? So if
And-
I have 1 car, absolutely, I have a spot waiting for me at all times,
Sure.
regardless of my schedule. If I work from home, or if I commute, or if I go on vacation, I'm gonna leave it there. There will be a spot dedicated to my unit. It's the other 20 spots that are kind of flex.
Sure.
Okay,
And
is that what we're saying?
that's what I said.
Okay, all right. Deputy Mayor? And, oh, wait, just one more question. Obviously, I know Ms. Ambrosino is in there, Mr. Ferrara, Mr. Cassisi, right, attorneys, architects, is that the only use, those are the only three uses in the building going forward?
Those are the uses in the building. That's, the plan is that that will continue,
Continue.
and hopefully for a very long time.
Yep. I just want to make sure it's not going to be a doctor's office where there are going to be many, obviously, attorneys and
No.
architects, they have appointments, so the person's coming only at a certain time and for a certain
There-
purpose, and they're leaving, but we're not going to have, because I drive by there now, and I see the lot generally full. So those people, I assume, are all in that building, employees, owners, visitors, et cetera. We're chopping off part of the building, so we're getting rid of some square footage, but where are those dozens of cars that are currently parking there going to park? I assume that they could only park in those 24 flex spots, not in the other 30, correct?
Yeah, they, only in those other spots, in those flex spots, not in the spots that are occupied by, or dedicated for apartment use. I don't know, Mayor, where those cars come from. I do know that, they each have a different business. For example, Mr. Ambrosino's business is construction, and they do have project managers. So many times there could be cars there, but more often than not, from what I understand, they're actually out of projects. They're driving directly to the job site and to the project. So, that to me was always a consideration when we had our discussions, that those aren't necessarily office jobs. Those are people that are out in the field. And that's a bulk of the employees are just that. So whether there are times when people come back to the office, I can only guess. But the number of spots that are there are sufficient for the commercial use that's there as well.
And can you talk to us about the third floor, the last floor, setback, great, again, light down the street. Are there any amenities on the roof?
No, the roof itself is going to be either gabled or flat roof. Are there portions of it that are gabled?
Yeah, the third floor is set back, so what we did, if you could picture it, the building has...
Please approach.
The building, and I can show you on the plans, basically has two sets of apartments, north and south, and a central hallway. On the third floor, the apartment is set back over the hallway, creating that 5-foot difference, which is the balconies along the north side of the building. So each of those apartments, which are only 6 of them on that floor, that one half, each of them have their own balcony. And again, it solved us in many ways, which is that it gave us the inference of it being more of a 3-story building. It gave us a break to it where we have some more articulation of the facade with railings to the balconies, and it also gave us the amenity to those apartments up on the top floor to have their own private exterior space.
Okay. Stay right there, Mr. Farrar. I'm going to say something that, and it sounds like you worked really hard to get it right, but my first glimpse of this, I would like less Kingdom Family Homes, meaning corner of Harrison and Main, and more south of you. And we know the Seafield Center right next to you, just an aberration architect. I'm not an architect, and I look at it and it's just, who thought of that, right? Who built it? I hope it wasn't you. No. Present company excluded. But I would like to see the, I like the brick so I like half of your building, the brick half. The other half, what is that material, right? This kind of, because to me, this has a look, and I heard you, and if I had my eyes closed and I couldn't see this, it would sound really, really great. It sounded like you were really trying to incorporate. I just don't see these areas here where you got that from. I like these areas. I'm not so sure. And as Mr. Martin said, and I don't want a bunch of similar projects. This is the second application in the historic district. If you take a look at the first application, that's more in line with the vision of the board, which is this sense of these separate buildings that were built, different. And I know that's not what this is, built at different heights, and different setbacks, and the windows are different heights, so that it looks like separate buildings. You know, if you're not absolutely married to, it's a beautiful building, it is, just as the Kingdom Family Homes building is a really nice building, but that one is also closer to homes on Harrison, so it does pull in that aluminum siding and kind of the cladding kind of look. Here, I will say this, I do like the fact that you set it back and put it on pillars to allow, so if I'm walking on the sidewalk on First Street, I don't have a wall right next to me. Instead, I have a fence, and then I have, what, like 15 feet or so before the wall begins. Great. And the same thing on Main Street. I think that has a great look. I just would like to see, not necessarily the shape, the gables are great. What is that material? So obviously, this is brick, right?
Right.
What is that off-white stuff?
Well, we were looking at it as a stucco, or we could actually do it as a planking if that was more the desire. The town doesn't really have much in the way of a residential look in terms of a planking or,
Right.
you know, some sort of an element of that nature, which is more residential, but it is something we could consider.
Or
The,
perhaps a different color brick, like there's a building, 2 buildings down from you that's got a yellowish brick, right? And then on the next block, you have, where Fox's is, you have the traditional red brick, but then you have some different buildings. You know, we actually looked at this, and I'm not the only one that feels this way. So I know that, you know, we're talking about aesthetics, that's easy to change.
Right.
30 units, the look of it, the footprint of it, the height, for me, it works absolutely right. This was the vision of the historic downtown, was to keep the massing down, to keep the height down, to let light in. You've done all of those things, you know, the parking as well. But aesthetically, I don't know if, and I know that we have that parking garage right across the street, but I just would like to see more historic elements brought in. This is beautiful, lots of clean lines. I almost feel like a little less clean lines.
Okay.
Am I-
Yeah, our concept was basically, if you walk down those streets, it's series of 35-foot wide buildings. I mean,
Right.
that's basically what it is. And this kind of carried that cadence across. But I think what you're talking about is more textural than an
Right.
actual architecture.
Yes.
In terms of, you know, how it's broken up. It's a
Yep.
question of what the materials are on the outside that you might feel are more usual or customary to what you would, you know, want to say. We'll take a look at
Okay.
what's on Harrison. Harrison is certainly a much more residential block and probably more deserving of a clapboard kind of a
Right.
style. But we could certainly look at how that could
No,
be
I don't want you to
integrated.
look on Harrison for inspiration. I want you to look on Main Street
Right.
and Second Street for
Right.
inspiration.
Yeah, we did at first look at the Main Street buildings. So there are like 2 or 3 tan brick buildings.
Mhm.
But we felt there was more predominance in terms of being a red brick because we had the Presbyterian Church
Mhm.
and the
Post office.
post office right across from us. And if you kind of looked around, every third building was a red brick building. So we kind of felt the red brick was the right way to think. I think the question really is,
I like the brick part.
yeah, is really just the intermediate pieces in
Yes.
between. I think we could study that.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I actually would just reiterate what he just said. I'm agreeing with Mayor Pereira. It's a beautiful building in isolation. To me, it looks very contemporary. And I think we're missing the historic part of the historic overlay. So if you could just kind of rework some of that, I guess I'm the aesthetic police here tonight, but I keep on going back to the aesthetics, and I think you definitely achieved the mixed-use look and the size and shape that fits in that corner. But the historic elements of the visual could kind of be reworked a little bit, I think. And then I have one other thing, just to go back to the parking, I have one question. I understand there's 24 extra spots. If I had 2 cars, could I come to you and say, hey, I'll pay for a second spot? And if you're gonna allow that, how many commercial spaces will you make sure you leave? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Do you
would,
understand that?
I think there has to be a balance there. Certainly, you know, not to put anyone on the spot, but I would think that knowing that you have a commercial building and you have employees, the next route, and it is one that, you know, they understand, and we've had this conversation. There's really no reason why, if that happens, that the commercial use can't go down to the MAA field and buy 10 spots. and passes for employees and have them park there and walk up the block.
Okay.
And certainly that would be the answer. Not to prevent somebody from being able to have a car, but look for alternatives for the business use to actually move their employees a block away.
Right, because my concern there, especially with the post office and the pizzeria and there's things there where people are coming for short terms, I don't want the commercial building to have employees or guests who are feeding the meter all day long.
Right.
Because then we're losing the people who are coming down there for lunch or for the post office or for whatever reason to have a spot. So I just want to avoid that, if you
And
could be conscious of that.
and of course, and again, we actually had this conversation as we were discussing, different scenarios. There are options for purchasing spots. Other companies have done it. It's not
Yes.
an inconvenience, and certainly they understand the priority is to make sure that people have a place to park, and their employees can certainly park a block away.
And we do have a parking program, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, for commercial use employees.
Yep.
They get a specific pass, so just be conscious of that, I ask. But I think it works. I think it's a nice use of mixed use residential, commercial. I think it will elevate what's going on down there and bring some foot traffic to our businesses down there, which is what we want, so I like it.
It's a quiet block. Having some housing on that corner, because you have a parking garage across the street, you have a large parking lot there on the corner, you have the church, and you have the post office, tends to be pretty quiet. Adding some activity there could be very helpful. So, thank you.
I agree, thank you.
Trustee Casado?
Thank you. Mr. Martins, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Good to see you.
So let me go here. I'm getting lost. Yeah, so I want to go back to the paperwork from VHB.
Yes, sir.
You could demolish part of an office building? What is going to be demolished? What building?
The building itself, and I can certainly ask Mr. Ferrara to come up and explain it. The building itself, the current building, I'm told has 20,000 square feet. A portion of it is being removed and taken out and space made for this.
So if I may, the existing building covers this whole chunk of change.
I'm just gonna show Mr. Casado here. So this is the building, and they would chop this off.
Oh, this piece here is going to be
Yeah.
chopped off?
Yeah.
There's a medical thing there, right? No?
No, there used to be a medical school
All right,
there.
so now
not
it's,
anymore.
okay.
That Chinese medical school.
All right, so that's vacant, that's,
How's
gonna-
acupuncture?
all right, so that's going to be taken down.
Right, so it's really this corner here that's going to be modified, and this piece in here that'll be modified. They're moving upstairs, that's Mr. Cassisi's space. This is part of Mr. Ambrosino's space, they'll be moving upstairs as well. The piece in the back here is where we're going to be placing the personal storage area. So back in this space is where we're gonna create a new entranceway and the elevator and the stair going up to the upper floor. I could show you that in a moment. So if you look here, obviously for us to stay in the building, we have to save the toilets. It would be mayhem if we didn't. I said, yeah, we, obviously to stay in the building while we're doing the work, we will have to maintain the bathrooms here and the electrical closet. So this part is all staying. However, this piece is where we're going to recreate it. We're placing an elevator and a stair here. And this piece in the back is, which is the southeast corner, is where we'd be locating the personal storage. It's this piece back here. So this is the new entranceway and the new vertical corresponding space.
Okay, thank you. And then just a clarification, you indicate it's going to be a three-story building?
3 stories above the parking. So
So if you go to, can you go to the first page? What do we see, open terrace, 4th floor? Right,
Mr. Casado, my preference. I counted 1 floor, 2 floor, the 3rd floor above the parking. If you count the parking as a story, then it comes up, and it's 4th floor up here.
all right, so it's really going to be a four-story,
4 stories, 3 over
Okay,
1.
fine,
The first
okay.
floor is parking.
okay. Now, I was at the parking lot this afternoon, and there were 32 cars parked in the existing parking lot. So they're not gonna be able to park in this parking lot if this building is approved, right?
They will not.
Right, so
The-
they have to find
they'll-
alternate parking.
Yeah, again, the configuration of the building will be smaller, so I'm not sure how many people will actually be using the parking lot, but as we said earlier, 30 of these spots are going to be dedicated to the apartments. Each one's going to get one, and as the deputy mayor asked, the priority is going to be for the tenants who are there. We don't want tenants spilling out onto the street, and certainly we have the flexibility to be able, for our own employees, to get permits from the village and have them park in a village lot and walk.
Okay. I agree with the mayor about the look of the building. I think there should be some changes. And finally, I have the same water and sewer concerns that I expressed with the last hearing. You mentioned the restaurant usage, but your building is just gonna add to the number of people that are gonna be using water and sewage. So again, I always have, I'm sorry, maybe it's me, I have a major concern what's gonna happen with our village over the past number of years with the
No,
water and sewage.
Mr. Casado, Trustee Casado, I certainly understand. There will be a point,
Yeah, there will be a point.
I don't know that, because I don't know that water usage is necessarily linear. I do think that there will be uses that are going to cease to exist in this village over the next 10, 20 years, where there won't be as much water use, and there may be other uses that will provide for that as well. So providing a study that allows you to have a holistic approach to it. And it's not just water consumption. Look, there are trillions of gallons of water in the sole source aquifer from which we get our water. The pumping capacity of our wells is significant. Many times it comes down to infrastructure. It comes down to the size of the pipes. It comes down to the ability to move water in a certain area and whether or not those pipes are large enough to carry that water. I think that's the kind of study that the mayor mentioned earlier, being able not only to determine how much water we can get, because frankly, the capacity to get water from the aquifer is pretty significant, but what is the infrastructure in the village and what is our capacity to be able to move that water to different sections of the village so that you can access it? Again, understanding what the uses are currently, what the projected uses are going forward. Are there uses that are going to come offline and therefore no longer use as much water as they are using right now? That's a great study, and it's a study that I encourage the village to do. So your point is very well made. I would just suggest that the amount that we're talking about here is not the breaking point, or shouldn't be considered as a reason for perhaps not voting for this project, although by bringing up the issue, I think we're highlighting the point that needs to be focused on by the village as a whole. So I do appreciate you bringing it up. I would just encourage the board, in the context of all of the uses that we have here in the village, that this is perhaps not the one that warrants holding up an application.
But Mr. Martins, how do I know if you're not the building that's gonna be the breaking point? I'm just bringing it up. It's not gonna, I'm just bringing it up.
Because by the time that happens, and again, I would suggest, so that nobody out there is worried about this village's capacity to provide water and provide water at 7,000 gallons per day. I would suggest that if our village was that close to being at capacity, this board probably wouldn't be having this conversation in the context of this application. There would be a superintendent of public works or a department head for the water department sitting at this podium telling the board that we have a problem. And I, to my knowledge, have not heard that yet. Now, there can be concerns long-term structurally for the village in terms of the direction it's heading, and there is always a need for a plan and to be prepared. But I would think that if we were at a point where that was really a significant and imminent concern, not that anyone should be concerned that it is imminent or significant, but it is something that is good practice for municipalities to kind of check the box and check in on it from time to time. So the fact that it is I here talking in the context of a 30-unit apartment building and 7,000 gallons per day, as opposed to Mr. Rini here explaining that there's a significant problem and we may need to start curtailing water usage in the village. I think that kind of speaks to the issue as well.
Okay, just again, express to my concern.
No, Trustee Casado, point well made, certainly important, and certainly the village should be doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Clark.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I like the project. I think it's fits well with the area.
What do you think of the architecture?
I agree with the deputy mayor. I think she's a very smart woman, and I think you should listen to her.
It's four. We're 4 for 4, but thank you.
So
I
I
think,
agree with what she said.
It's usually smart.
Sounds
Thank
like
you.
me
Thank
at
you.
home.
Trustee.
Very smart man
I
on
don't
this
know.
board.
Mr. Farrar may be looking for some office space come tomorrow. Trustee Salaski.
My questions have been answered, and either by the questions that the board asked or by the presentation itself. I like the project. I think this is exactly what we were hoping would come down to that area. I think it will help in the revitalization of that area, but it's 5 for 5 that I wish there were more historical aspects in the exterior of the building.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee. Mayor, if you will permit me, and perhaps Mr. Gibbons can help me with this, would there be a reason why we could not, and the board could not perhaps vote on this application today, with the caveat that the applicant will come back to the board with some alternative facades? The facade is literally the last thing that will be placed on this project as the project is constructed and built, with the understanding that that will be an item that we will work with the village and hopefully meet your approval with some alternatives that you can consider at a later date. Would that be okay?
Would there be any reason why your client couldn't wait until we saw those renderings for us to approve the project? You see what I'm doing there?
I did.
Yeah. So I think there are bigger concerns here than just that. I think what you heard tonight is the project's good, the bones are good, the numbers are good, they work. There's a few questions that frankly I want to have a conversation with Mr. Reedy about. I want to see when this modeling will come out, because I do think that I don't want, I agree with you, we're not there, we're not at the tipping point. Trust me, I would have Mr. Reedy knocking down my door, but I also don't want people to be alarmed, and I want to, not just for this application, but for any future application, because to Mr. Casado's point, you know, the tipping point could be a two-family house that's being built at some point, right? There will be the straw that breaks the camel's back, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a 300-unit project or a 30-unit project. It could be anything. I don't think we're there, but there are some questions beyond the aesthetics that for me, and I think if I'm hearing from the board, especially from Mr. Casado, that we need answered. I think this gives Mr. Farrar time to go back and come back with something that pleases the board. And in the meantime, we can perhaps get some answers for Mr. Casado, for the public, and for the rest of the board when it comes to water and sewer. So I know that he asked the question of Mr. Gibbons, but...
No, Mayor, it's your forum. I certainly wouldn't.
But I answered the question.
Mayor, my answer would have been, I'll formulate an opinion after I talk to the mayor.
Very smart man on this board.
So, Mayor, if I may then, and I do appreciate and I certainly understand, we will work on it diligently. We will come back with some alternatives and just...
And I would like, please add to that for Mr. Ambrosino, because unless Mr. Ambrosino would like to come up and go on the record, I want to ask about the current, because I just pulled up a picture and there were 34 spots taken. But there's no gate, there's no security guard, so it could be people sneaking in, going into the post office. I don't know. He's the one that has the anecdotal knowledge, and I know he seems to be, if I can read body language, he wants to get up and speak. So
no,
come on up.
Ambrosino's not coming up tonight. He may
can
come up
see
next
that
time.
He wants to he wants to speak, and I know that Mr. Gibbons loves it when we prolong hearings. So,
Especially on my birthday.
on his birthday, today is Mr. Gibbons' birthday.
This is where I want to be, Mayor.
Yes.
So Mayor, as you've requested, Mr. Ambrosino would like to address some of these concerns, please.
Thank you. Michael Ambrosino, I'm the current owner with Mr. Cassisi of 155 First Street LLC. Just to give you some background, because we've been at this location now for about 6 years, we're losing 10,000 square feet of tenants. So we're reducing the building from 20,000 to 10,000. It's a full building now, there were only 34 spots taken. So 10,000 square feet of tenants are moving out. They're going out. There's not companies that I currently own or Mr. Cassisi currently owns. The remaining tenants are going to be Ambrosino Construction, ACC Real Estate Services, which is a property management firm. We manage 3 million square feet of real estate throughout Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk County. So there's no concern with property management, snow removal, anything like that. My son runs the construction company. He's 31 years old. We only have 7 employees in the whole entire company. My daughter runs the real estate company. We only have 6 employees in the real estate company. Sal and I own Combined Resources Consulting and Design. He'll be staying in the building. We only have 12 employees. And Mr. Cassisi owns Cassisi Law Firm, and it's him, his wife, his son, and 2 other employees. So we're going to be there for a long time. I have a 31-year-old, a 28-year-old, and a 22-year-old family member running my companies. Sal has his company. We know how many employees we have and how much parking that we need. So we'll always have less than 20 employees. I run a very small, tight firm. I've been running it for 25 years. So we're going to be the tenants there for 20 years. My son's only 30, or maybe 30 years. So we're not going to, the overlay in the parking is something that shouldn't be an issue for the board. And Mr. Martins asked about why there wouldn't be a reason I wanted to vote. Basically, it's time. My second floor tenant stops paying rent December 31st. So, as you know, empty buildings don't generate cash flow. There's bills to pay.
Mr.
So-
Ferrara, get to work.
Yeah, so I would ask the board that, is this something that can be done before the next hearing, or do we have to come back to another hearing? Can it be done?
No, to be honest with you, I'm inclined to close the hearing and reserve decision. So, no, we don't need to have another hearing. What we need to do is see other renderings, and then we can make a decision in your absence. You don't have to be here for the decision. I think in terms of testimony, I think we've heard enough. Any questions that we have, we've laid them out to you, or any concerns that we have. So just come back with those concerns. You just allayed my fears about parking. So it really is about the aesthetics that we want to see. Bless you. And also on our end, Mr. Rini to work on water and sewer to take care of Mr. Casado.
Just
here.
keep in mind that, yeah.
And they're legitimate questions and legitimate concerns. We did just, within the last 2 or 3 years, put a whole new sewer from where you are, actually from Harrison, all the way to Old Country Road. So I know that that's new, and we had to replace, the main was about 100 years old, the one that we replaced, right? And it was back pitched and all that, so those issues should be fixed. But those are questions that we're gonna have to come up with internally, so that we have all the information that is available to us. Because, as Mr. Casado mentions, this application is not happening in a vacuum. This application has to be taken in the context of 111 Second Street, which was the first application on the historic district. It has to be taken in the context that burned out building is going to be developed, right? And we know that it's going to be about 40 feet, and we can make an educated guess as to what the water demands will be there, what the sewer demands will be there. So we want to make educated guesses, because we are essentially taking what was an empty parking lot and now putting a building on it. It's not like you're taking down a building and I know you're taking down a part of a building, but you're really putting something new, and I like it. It's certainly going to be nicer. And Mr. Farrar, from the rear, because of the Seafield Center, they have windows facing, so you have to be, fire code, you have to be 15 feet away from that, correct? So you're not going right up to that building, right?
We're a fireproof building and we have sprinklers, so I believe we're 8 feet away
From them, and that's up to state code, that's,
You have to be a certain percentage of windows less than
okay, gotcha,
25% or some odd number that they have in the code.
okay.
So, Mayor, thank you. If Mr. Ferrara does leave here tonight, go back to the office and start working on some renderings, we will bring them to you quickly.
Yep.
And then,
Yeah, so to Mr. Ambrosino's point, we have a meeting next week, we have 2 meetings in November, we have 2 meetings in December, so we certainly can, you know, the ball's in your court. And we have 1 ball in our court as well, but we'll deal with that. But we have yet to open it up to public comment, so.
no, I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the 6th row? Anyone in the 7th row? No. Okay, so, Mr. Gibbons, anything from you?
I would just say, going on your comments, if you could close the hearing and leave the record open for submission of new renderings.
Okay, that's what we'll do then. I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing and leave the record open pending submissions by the applicant.
Motion.
Motion by Deputy Mayor Sartori, second by Trustee Casado. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Gentlemen, looking forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Have a great night.
Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. And
If he says it's
Definitely aesthetic police.